I'm Todd Gill. I'm 50 years old, married to my wife Lisa for over 30 years, and I have two kids, Zachary and Larissa.
My name is Zach Gill. I'm 26 years old, been married for just over 4 years, and currently working as a school teacher in Oakville.
So I've been a Christian all my life. I don't ever remember walking away from God. Committed my life to Christ at a very young age. Had an experience with God when I was 10 years old. It was very vivid, very impressed on my spirit and my mind. And I was baptized in the Holy Spirit and spoke in other tongues for about 3 hours. And it never left me. I was never able to walk away from God. I was always reminded of that. And then when I was probably 20 years old, I was introduced to getting more involved with ministry, got involved with youth ministry. I became a full-time pastor for a few years and a senior pastor at a church for a while. And yeah, I've served the Lord all my life, and I just love Him.
I was pretty much born and raised in the church. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I accepted Jesus into my heart. And since then, sort of was on a steady path, learning more about God and learning to trust Him every day of my life. And just trying to continue to hunger after Him and continue to learn more about Him.
In December of 2011, we went on a family cruise. We were on an excursion in Jamaica, and we were doing a cave excursion. And we were coming up out of the cave, and I had to grab onto my wife, Lisa, and I said, I gotta stop. I can't get my breath. I think I'm having a heart attack. When I got back from our holiday, I immediately set up an appointment in January to go and see a cardiologist, because I thought for sure it was my heart. And when we started going through all the testing and whatnot, they put me on a treadmill. And as soon as I was on the treadmill for about 30 seconds, the two nurses and the doctor grabbed me off of the treadmill and sat me in a chair and said, "Why are you still standing up?" And I was like, I don't know, like I feel a bit dizzy, but I'm okay. From that, the cardiologist took me into another room. He looked at me and he said, "Listen, it's not your heart. I think you have a lung problem." He got on the phone with a specialist and said, "I have a candidate for you. I believe he has a condition called hepatopulmonary syndrome, which is basically the liver affecting the lungs." Basically, I was running out of air. And that was a big moment. I was kind of set back by that. You know, it was one of these things where you just go through the test, you're going through the motions, and every month, every few weeks, I was getting sicker and sicker, and I didn't realize it, but I was getting sicker and sicker until the point where they said, you need a liver transplant to fix your lungs. And that was a shocking moment, but thank God that I had God in my life, because I don't know how I would have got through it without the Lord. He was he became very strong in my life at that point.
Eventually, I just noticed my father getting weaker and weaker every day, and it's hard to wrap your head around that, growing up your entire life and seeing this man that you've always looked up to, that was this incredibly strong figure, going through something so difficult. To be broken down by a sickness was just a really crazy reality for me to go through. Growing up, I've always had a close relationship with my dad. He's been a spiritual guide for me. He's been an amazing dad, always that dad that was, that fan in the stands at every one of my games, and he was always there for me. And at the time of all this news, there was just a lot of uncertainty in my life, just being at that typical teenage phase. I've just finished grade 12. What am I going to do with my life? what's my next step? Where am I going to go? And then to have this to be a part of the equation, it was a really challenging time in my life. You sort of wrestle with God a little bit and trying to understand why. It's just kind of the question that was going through my mind all the time.
As things started progressing, I was having to wear oxygen, and I was very reluctant in doing that. I distinctly remember one Sunday night, I was playing the drums, and I saw this blackness go in front of my eyes, and I felt like I was going to faint. And I had never fainted in my life, but it was an eerie, eerie feeling. It wasn't long after that I couldn't work anymore. So my work said, here, Todd, here's a list of customers. You just call them and see if you can drum up any business. You just stay at home. That's all you need to do. And it got to the point where I was calling a customer off of the list, and I would hang up the phone and I would forget even who I called. That's how much oxygen I was lacking. My brain was shutting down. All my organs were starting to really just shut down. I told my work, I said, listen, I just can't do this anymore. I'm gonna have to go off on sick leave. And that was a big moment in my life. At that point, I was wearing a pager on my side for a transplant. So I couldn't be any more than 2 hours away from Toronto General. They sent home a form with us talking about a living donor. So now I was wearing this pager and I was waiting for somebody to have an accident and not completely die so that they could give me a living donation. We did everything we could do to protect the kids from knowing anything, but no matter what happened, we wanted them to know that God was always in control.
He kept me in the dark about a lot of things. There's actually a few details that he revealed later on. One was that he had 6 months to live, and I was just taken so far back by that it came to that close to losing my father. Like, think of how fast 6 months could go by in our everyday lives. That could have been how much time I had with my dad, and I knew obviously that the situation was dire, right? That we were getting really close, but I had no idea it was that bad. It was just a really kind of sobering reality for me. And the fact that, he had the strength enough to not only battle what he was going through physically, but also still maintain that role of protecting the family and being the anchor, really, that he has constantly been throughout my entire life. This is crazy to me. When it got to the point where he was on the deceased donor list, and I know that he was waiting for something to come up, and it was a long time and we weren't hearing any news, that I started to get some sort of a hint that things were starting to look really bleak. And that's when I really started to seek after God and pray, and just something inside me was just constantly telling me, like, you gotta do it, you gotta get tested. And I didn't have any thoughts about what it would mean for me. All I knew at the time, the only information I was given, is that if I was a match and I could be a living donor, that there was a possibility it could heal my dad. At that moment, I just didn't really think about long term what it would mean for me. I just sort of looked at my dad and looked at the situation he was in, and I just sort of zoomed ahead 10, 15, 20 years and thought about, I want my dad around to see when I have a son. I want my dad around to see me get married. I want my dad around to see me graduate university. And those were really the only prevailing thoughts that were going through my mind. And so really all of the thoughts become secondary.
And then one day, right out of the blue, Zachary comes up to me and says, Dad, I want to get tested. And I said, no, you're not. That's not happening. He said, I'm 18 years old and you can't stop me.
And the really challenging thing for me at the time is because I have this big decision ahead of me. To even get tested is a big decision. I remember the doctors telling me I had to meet with a psychiatrist to make sure that I was in the right headspace before going in. And I remember the doctor telling me every step of the way, he said, you know you can back out of this. We'll never tell anybody. Not even your dad will know. Well, I'll just lie to him and say that there was a medical complication, and only you will know. And so I'm struggling with this in my mind. You know, that's when sort of God put people in front of me that I really needed at the time. And that people that, you know, I wasn't even in close contact with. Right? I remember my Uncle Rob being the one who sort of really stepped up during that time. And we hadn't had this really close relationship in the years prior to that. And all of a sudden he arrives on the scene and becomes this person. Hey, if you need someone to talk to, like if you need someone to confide in, I'm here. I don't know what I would do if God didn't put those people in my life and God didn't really put this sense of comfort over me after going through all these decisions.
There were a lot of decisions we had to make. Of course, in the natural, you have to make some decisions. Like, I knew that in case something didn't go right, I had to prepare my family for me not being there anymore. So we had to make some tough decisions financially and prepare all the documentation and everything. We had to get everything in place. And although we were doing that and we were trusting God all the way, there was just this confidence that everything was going to be okay. It was a shocking moment when Zachary came to me and said, Dad, I want to see if I can donate. I really didn't know how to process it. I mean, how do you process your son, which has been accepted to multiple universities? He's just beginning his life, and I know what's in store for me if I don't get a transplant and unless God heals me. There's no way I could let him go through that. I mean, there's no way I could let him even consider it. But he was adamant that he wanted to do it. And I remember this statement that he said to me. He said, Dad, I need you around for a long time. And I guess that was probably my breaking moment. And then I said, okay, I'll let you go through the process.
I found out that I was a match after going through various tests. The doctors wanted to make absolutely sure that the anatomy of my liver would coincide correctly with his. And so they decided that we need to do a liver biopsy. So I go into this hospital room to get this test. I didn't know what a biopsy was. And they decide that, they have to feed whatever is inside of me, take a piece of my liver, and pop right out. Now, despite going through all of this, what's also crazy is that I have high anxiety when it comes to doctors and hospitals. It terrifies me. I remember them taking this biopsy, the doctors feeding it through, and I don't know why he did this at the end. I don't know if he thought it was funny or what it was, if he had this twisted sense of humor, but he picked out a piece of my liver and he showed me and he said, here, we're done. And I took a look at that and my eyes rolled into the back of my head and I started convulsing on the bed, just totally body going out of control, fish out of water on the dock, flopping, right? And so all I remember is just closing my eyes, having an intense dream, waking up, and there's like 4 faces in front of me yelling out my name. And I'm just looking around going, what? And I look to my side, and here's my father. He's like ripping off his breathing tubes, and he's like, here, does he need air? Does he need oxygen? I got it. Just imagine, this was the last test that they needed to do before we were going into this surgery. And, the doubt kind of creeped into my mind. Goodness, they just took like a centimeter off my liver, and I just passed out and convulsed. Now they gotta take 2/3? Like, how am I going to react to that? We had to go under the knife very, very soon. Like within weeks, days, perhaps. And this is where they really start intensively talking to me about, okay, this is what's gonna happen. This is how you'll feel afterwards. These are the risks. And remember, the entire way through, they continue asking me, are you sure you want to do this? They give you every opportunity, right up to the point where like my bed is just about to break open to the surgery room, the operating room doors. And they asked me one more time. They said, Zach, you can back out of this right now. No one will know. We'll just tell everybody that something went wrong. No, my feelings towards it never changed, even after that crazy test experience. Mentally, I was like relaxing on a beach. Just that sense of peace, that sense of calm that God brought over me to be able to go into that surgery room and get the operation. Because all I could think about was just that future ahead. That 15, 20 years from now. I just sort of like imagine those monumental moments and picture my dad, speaking at my wedding or congratulating me after I graduate, or someday watching me have my own kid.
Through the whole process, I was depending on God, and God was teaching me so many things about myself, things that I didn't even know about myself through this whole process. And I remember listening to a pastor one time, and in his message, he talked about, he said, when you're going to school and you're in the classroom and the teacher's talking and is teaching you a lesson, that you can put up your hand, you can ask a question, and that's what teaching is. That's, you can interact with the teacher, and you ask a question, the teacher gives you the answer. And through this whole process, I felt like I was going through a test. But he said something very interesting. He said, but when it comes to exam time, you can't ask the teacher any questions. And I remember when I was getting prepared, they were about to wheel me into surgery, and you have those few moments by yourself. My wife, Lisa, had just left the room, and they were just preparing things on the other side. And it was interesting because I was just lying there and it was silent. God wasn't speaking, and I wasn't asking any questions. The teacher was silent then. And I remember when I woke up from surgery, the first words out of my mouth, although I had a tube down my throat so I couldn't physically say it, was, God, I passed the test. And one of the most incredible moments of my life I've ever had was when I woke up from surgery. And when I opened my eyes and I said, God, I passed the test, I can't describe to you the presence that filled that room. It's one of those things that you experience in, I hope everybody experiences it in their lifetime, but it was so real. God was so real. It was an amazing thing. I started humming or trying to sing as the deer pants for the water, and the presence of God just so filled the room.
They make it very well known that in this surgery process, and the doctor said this outright, what's interesting about it is we're going to make a sick man well, yes, but we're also going to make a well man sick. I just remember this moment, and I can only look back on it now with such fondness. At the time, I was just going through so much difficulty, but to see my dad walk in front of my hospital room. His skin is just a totally different shade. He doesn't have oxygen in his nose, and he's got this smile on his face as if like we were back in Jamaica when he first found out that all this was going on. And I just remember just looking at that and just being amazed.
It was after the surgery that I realized the beautiful picture of what God had done for us. You know, we have God the Father that looked down on humanity and it needed to be fixed. And the only way he could fix it was to send his son. And God just revealed such a beautiful picture of now what my son had done for me. Because there was no way that I was going to live outside of a miracle unless somebody gave me a piece of their liver. And it was just such a beautiful picture that unfolded how God loved us so much that he gave himself so that I could live again. And my son had done the same thing. It's just such a beautiful moment. And you never forget those things. You never forget. How could I forget now what God had done for me, what my son had done for me, but what God's done for all of us by giving his son.
You know, in my eyes, I thought the miracle would be this instantaneous healing. But the miracle was in the journey to get there. The miracle was in this entire process. The things that God taught me, the things that God put into my life, is something that I will never forget. And especially as I'm recovering from the surgery, like I remember crying out to God, like, tears in my eyes, praying and crying. And I couldn't remember a time in my life where I know I did that. And I really realized it's just like, God, I need you. Like, I need you in this moment. In that moment where I'm just bedridden, it was the hardest thing for me to just walk a lap around my hospital room. And it was in that moment that God was really showing me how to lean on him, how to trust on him, what it truly means when he says that I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. Because I had no strength. I had zero. God really taught me what that was all like. At that time, I was just starting to date this girl, and we met in youth group, and throughout this entire process, she was right by my bedside, and that ended up being my wife. I realized right then and there, I was like, this is the one. When we say in sickness and health, when I said that in the wedding vows, I knew it was true. Because we'd been through sickness and health. I know what that looks like.
The amazing thing was the surgeon looked at Zachary and put his liver up on the screen and said, look, I can't even tell that we did anything to your liver. It has grown back so perfect. We can't even tell that you performed a transplant. Yeah, it was incredible. It was incredible. When it became the 5th anniversary, I said to Zachary, I said, we need to start doing something special. And so anyway, we decided we're going to go to an NFL game. I'd never been to an NFL game, and Zachary had never been to one. So we decided we're going to go to an NFL game. And we were at the store, and we decided, let's get jerseys. We got a jersey, and we were both at number 12, which is the year that we had the transplant happen, was 2012. And then on the back, and rather than putting a player's name or our names, we put the amount of years that it's been. Every year since, we've invited whoever wants to come, and we just celebrate on a weekend God's goodness and his faithfulness and our health and strength. It was incredible how many people have stopped us. And it's just been an incredible opportunity to tell our story. So if anybody's going through anything in their lives that is a challenge, whether it be with their health, with their finances, their marriage, whatever, because we all go through different things in our lives. I can honestly say that without God, I don't know how I would have got through all these things in my life. Proverbs 3 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding." And that's difficult. That's difficult to do when you're going through it. God is the Alpha and the Omega God, but He's also the God in the middle. You know, He's the God, He's there when you're going through the toughest time in your life. God's there, and He's closer than you think. All you have to do is just breathe His name.
Whatever it is you're going through now, though we don't understand it in our own minds, and we don't understand why we're going through those things, God sees the overall picture. He's omnipresent. He knew everything before time began. He knows what's going to happen in your life, and He has a plan for you. And so we really need to trust that God's plan for us is for our benefit, and that He's going to work everything out.
And He'll bring peace, He'll bring comfort when it seems like everything is collapsing around you. He'll bring peace and comfort, and He'll bring you through, and you'll be a better person on the other side.
Everything in this world can truly fade away, and the one thing that really truly matters while we're here on earth is your relationship with God. And that at any moment we don't know when our time will come. I didn't expect this to happen when I was 18, when my dad was at such a young age. But you learn right then and there that everything in this world really doesn't matter. It's all about your relationship with God and making it right with Him.